In the late 1500s, the British ship Caravel Mercy sailed out of Plymouth to prove a faster way across the Atlantic Ocean. The crew were calm, experienced, and used to rough water. Nothing about this trip was meant to be strange, but somewhere south of the usual route, the ocean began changing. The water got warmer, sea animals disappeared, the surface went flat and black, and the bottom of the ship started taking hits from below that felt like they were on purpose. The men promised they were being looked at by something that should not have existed. So before we continue, please make sure you leave a like and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. I worked on the ship Caravel Mercy out of Plymouth in the year when frost stayed late on the fields and summer came on a hard wind. The ship measured only a little more than 20 steps from front to back, with a square sail and a triangle sail on the back mast. We carried barrels of rye crackers, salt beef, dried peas, and water that turned bad within days. Our orders were to test a faster path across the Atlantic Ocean by sailing south to the latitude of the Azores, then west with the steady wind until we turned to check our position. The captain, Edward Aldridge, wanted his name on a map that could make a crossing shorter. I kept the journal and the box of tools. I had worked on 2 trips before and had both good teeth and a steady hand, which counted for more than talking. Our group was close and careful. Master Hargreaves figured out our position at noon with his tool and made our best guess at dawn. He trusted his numbers and did not like arguing. Owen Price had hunted whales from small boats and had scars on his forearms where a rope had torn skin to the bone. He carried a long iron pole of his own and sharpened it each night by the front mast out of habit, rather than orders. Ned Tripp was 14 and quick on ropes and lines, and he tried to copy the way older men walked. Parson Whitlow kept a small Bible in a waterproof bag and said prayers at sunset. The Dr. Bowl kept his knives wrapped in cloth and drank little. When the captain walked the deck at night, he rubbed the lower part of his back with his thumb as if it hurt him. He thought no one saw it. We left Ushant with a strong push and a gray sea. The wind held for 2 days and nights and then stopped. The Bay of Biscay gave us a slow rolling motion that lifted and dropped the ship without stopping. Tar oozed from the cracks in the afternoon. The ropes creaked in a steady rhythm. Rats came up from the storage area after dark, and Ned chased them with a length of rope. By the 5th day we had the sun clear at noon, and Master Hargreaves said our path was correct. A group of dolphins ran near the front, and Owen laughed and asked for a spike. The captain would not allow it. He wanted speed, not blood. The first change was small and easy to ignore. The water temperature rose within hours without a change in wind. When I lowered a bucket, the wood felt warm in my hands. A smell came off it that was not the usual salt water. It was sharp and metal-like. The parson said it was only a pocket of warm water. Hargreaves said the same and looked at the sun again as if it might confirm him. That night, the sea lost its surface ripples and lay in long rolls. There was no break or white edge. The wake behind us smoothed almost at once. I wrote that down because I had not seen it before. 2 days later, the birds stopped coming. In the English Channel and the Bay of Biscay, they came and went with the wind, but always a few circled us at dawn. On that day, the sky stayed empty. Ned said nothing until noon, and then he stood by the ropes and watched the horizon as if a line of men would appear there. Owen told him not to call bad luck by name. The captain said we were far from any coast and birds had no business with us. He said it with a flat voice, and he pulled again at the lower part of his back. The third change was the sound. At first I heard it through the ship when I leaned over the edge to rinse a pan. It was not thunder and not a crack. It was a deep knock, spaced out as if some heavy object hit wood from a distance. No one spoke of it until evening because a man alone can be wrong. When the second watch took the deck, the sound came again, and this time the deck boards carried it through our boots. Owen raised his head and stared into the dark sea without a word. Parson Whitlow began to speak and then shut his jaw. The captain told me to write, and I did. I wrote down the hours and the number of knocks. There were 3 in the first hour and 2 in the second, then none for a while. The wind held and our speed did not change. The 4th change came with the morning light. A dead pilot whale floated on our right side with the skin torn in 2 long strips from the neck to the back fin. The edges were clean, not ragged, and no birds worked on the wound. The flesh under the skin looked pale and tight. Owen stood on the rail and looked down at it and did not speak for a long time. Then he said only that no boathook was to touch it. The captain agreed and kept the ship away from the dead whale. We watched it fall behind, and I saw that the belly had not been opened. Whatever had cut it had stopped after the skin and fat. Bull marked it as something strange and went below. Nothing happened at noon. Hargreaves called out our position and the captain nodded. We ate crackers and peas and drank water that tasted like the barrel. Ned asked me what I wrote in the journal when nothing happened. I told him I wrote nothing and saved ink. He smiled at that and then looked out over the rail again. The light went away early that day. A wall of cloud rose in the west and ran across the sun, though the wind did not change. The surface lost more detail until it looked smooth and I could see our reflection in it when I leaned out by the chains. It was not a clear image. The ship made a darker shape under the water, and beyond that there was only darkness. When I lowered the weighted rope to check the depth, it fell without touching bottom for 150 fathoms, and then it fell more. The rope drifted to the south as if a slow current took it. I called out the depth and the direction, and Hargreaves wrote them down, and he frowned and started to say something and stopped. At sunset, we set the lamp at the back. The flame made a small circle of light on the wake, and a pale smear on the lower back sail. Men speak more at that hour or not at all. On that night they stood near, and even Ned let the rats pass without a chase. Owen sat on the front hatch with his iron pole across his knees. The metal looked dull and he rubbed it with oil. Near midnight the ship lurched without a change in wind or sea. It was a single heavy push from below and to the left. The wooden beam creaked and then steadied. The men froze in their places. The captain came up from his cabin and said only, "Everyone keep still." The push came again harder. The ship shifted a hand's width to the right and the water made a heavy slap against the boards. The lamp swung and threw shadows across the deck. I felt the push in my teeth. Hargreaves moved to the rail and leaned out. He saw only black water. The third push hit the bottom of the ship dead on. It lifted the front a little and set it down again. The mast shook. The ropes hummed. Owen stood. "That is not a log," he said. "That comes on purpose." He spoke with a steady voice that made the others breathe again because the word was plain. The captain said, "Stand ready," and we put more men at the ropes in case of sudden wind. There was none. We waited. Half an hour passed with no sound and no push. The sea stayed smooth. Hargreaves tapped the compass box and waited for the needle to settle. It hung 2 points off north and then settled where it should. He said nothing and closed the lid. At dawn we found marks on the ship. The carpenter Sutter went over the side in a rope with a hammer in his belt. He ran his hands over the boards and called up what he felt. Long shallow grooves in 2 places, deep scrapes in another, and a round hole the size of a man's fist where the tar had been torn free. He found a piece of hard white material stuck in the edge of a groove. We brought him up and he set the piece on the deck. It looked like a piece of tooth, heavy and smooth with a faint pattern that ran in one direction. Bull picked it up and pressed his thumb against it. It did not give. Owen said nothing for a long time and then said only, "It fed here and tasted tar." The day grew hot without weight in the air. The wind slowed. We drifted more than we sailed. The men spoke only when called upon. Ned cleaned the deck with sand and water until the boards showed their grain. He kept looking toward the front where Sutter had checked the holes. The captain kept to a circle of steps and rubbed his back. Hargreaves checked the sun at noon and made a long calculation that ended in a small frown. By late afternoon, the water grew darker beneath us. The change was not in the sky. It came from below. Standing at the rail, I saw a fog in the deep water that moved across our path. It was not a cloud of dirt. It moved with more solid edges. I called Owen to the rail. He leaned out and stared in silence. The shape passed under us and went out beyond the right side. It held together for a time and then broke. We could not measure how long it was, but it was longer than our ship. At sunset, we rolled up the sails and set a watch with orders to ring the bell at any knock or lurch. The parson asked to speak the evening prayer. The captain nodded. We stood with our heads down and listened. The words were short. When he finished, the sea gave a single thud under the back and the bell rang on its own where it hung by the wheel. No one moved. Night came on with no stars because the clouds stayed. The lamp circle on the wake looked smaller than before. The carpenter checked the lowest part of the ship for leaks and found none. The doctor laid out cloth and water by the main mast and said it was only being careful. The captain did not answer. He stood by the back rail and watched the water. Toward the middle of the night, the sea parted ahead of the front without wind, and a swell came at us from the dark. It was not a wave with a top. It was a lift that traveled under us and bent the ship. The mast leaned back and returned. The bell sounded again. Owen gripped his iron pole. He stared into the black water. He did not blink. At first light, the captain called all hands and gave out tasks without talking about the night. He told Sutter to nail extra strips over the worst grooves, and to pack the cracks twice with wood pieces and tar. He told me to keep the journal every 15 minutes. He told Owen to lay out every iron pole and coil 3 ropes by the front mast. Hargreaves checked the compass again and then took his board and made a new course that went more south. He did not say why. I felt a steady pull in my stomach that did not come from hunger. I wanted to see the sun high and the sea normal. The feeling did not pass. We tried to make speed, but the sail hung flat. The sea stayed level and without small waves. The crew's steps sounded louder than usual. Bull asked me for some vinegar to rinse cloth. He said he wanted it nearby. I brought it and set it by the main mast. He looked at the back and kept his hand still. By mid-morning, the smell from the water grew stronger. It carried a sour note like old iron. Ned called from the front. I went forward with Owen. A long strip of hide floated there, about as long as a tall man. It looked like skin from a great fish, pale on one side and darker on the other, with small pits where the hair would be on a seal, but larger and set wider apart. The cut edge showed fat and clean layers. Owen poked it with a boat hook. It was thick and heavy. He did not bring it on board. He let it slide away and wiped the hook with an oily rag. He did not speak until the piece fell behind. Then he said, "It feeds near us. It drops that much without caring." At noon, Hargreaves took a reading from the sun. His answer was shorter than usual. He closed the tool case and stood still for a full minute before writing his number. The captain asked him for the path he wanted. He tapped a spot on the map farther south. 1 degree, he said. The captain gave the order. We adjusted the ropes and moved the wheel to hold the new course. The ship answered, but slowly. The afternoon brought a test. Owen asked permission to try a bait. The captain looked at him and gave a small nod. Owen chose a quarter of salt beef from the barrel, wrapped it with rope, and fixed the end through the ring of a strong barrel. He threw it out at the back a dozen arm lengths and tied the rope to a post. The meat dragged in the wake. The barrel bumped behind it. The men stood along the rail without jokes or breathing through their teeth. We waited. The pull came without warning. The rope snapped tight and the post groaned. The barrel skipped once and then went under, pulled down like a stone. The ship slowed as if held by a rope. The rope burned a little smoke where it crossed the wood. Sutter poured seawater on it. The pull lasted 10 breaths and then let go. The rope went slack. The barrel shot up, hit the surface on its side, and rolled. It had deep grooves along 2 boards, each mark even, with a spacing like teeth. One end of the barrel was broken in, not crushed, but split by a single force. Owen pulled it on board with Ned and 2 more. He put a finger into one of the grooves and pressed until his nail bent. The wood had not broken along the grain. The groove cut clean across it. He said to no one, "This is a jaw with more reach than a boat." We put the broken barrel by the mast. Bull touched the marks and then turned his hand and pressed the back of his knuckles into them for size. He looked at the broken end, then at the toothpiece Sutter had found earlier, which I had wrapped and kept in the toolbox. Bull asked me for it. I brought it out. He held the piece to a groove in the barrel. The curve fit well enough to stop talking for a moment. Parson Whitlow said he had seen such stones in a display. Case in Exeter called tungstones by the old men, and a scholar who visited said they were teeth of a kind of great shark from old earth layers. The parson's voice shook on the word teeth. Hargreaves said only, "If it is that, it lives now." The sky got darker toward evening, though the cloud thinned a little. With the first darkness, a faint light began to show in the water. Not bright, but enough that a hand dipped in and moved would make a pale trace. I had seen such light before in warmer seas. On that night, the glow marked more than the ship. It marked a shape below us, a long shadow moving with steady turns. Each turn made 2 smears of light where the edges cut the water. The shape circled once and faded and then appeared again wider around. Ned gripped the rail with both hands. No one told him to let go. Owen got his iron pole. He stood ready, but he kept his arm close and did not show the point. The first strike on the steering came at the change of the watch. The wheel jerked in Willis's hands and kicked twice as if pushed from the rudder. The rope creaked and the pins rang in their holes. Willis called out. The captain reached him in 3 steps and took the bar with him. The back dipped. A heavy thud rose through the boards. Then a scraping began along the lower back post, slow and rough as if a hard surface pressed and moved there. Sutter and I ran back with a lamp and leaned over. We saw a pale, flat surface under the water, wide and flat, pass under the back and disappear. The scraping stopped. The wheel answered again but felt dull. "It has hurt the rudder," Sutter said. "May have bent the hinge." The captain nodded once. "We will try to steer with sail arrangement," he said. He spoke without emotion, but I heard the seriousness in it. We set up ropes to steer with sails if the wheel lost more control. The second strike came fast. It hit the back more directly and pushed the front off 3 points. The lamp swung and banged on the back rail. Willis swore and then caught himself. Ned stumbled and hit his shoulder on a pin. He bit his lip and stayed standing. The captain ordered the back sail loosened to help turn back. The ship answered with delay. The water behind us boiled and then went flat again. No fin cut the surface. Only the dim light in the sea showed a blur moving to the right and dropping back. The third strike threw a man. It came not at the back but along the left side just forward of the main mast. The ship lurched and a rope block jumped on its pin. Ned had just run past with a coil and the jump took his feet. He went to the rail, hit it with one side and tipped over. I reached and caught air. He disappeared without a cry. The water glowed where he went in. I saw his shape just under the surface, arms spread. The crew froze for half a breath. Then Owen threw a rope. The coil fell well. Ned's hand found it and closed. The rope jerked. A darker mass slid under him from front to back, a breadth wider than 2 men. A tail moved once and stirred a path of light. The mass rolled a little and showed a pale underside, then sank. We pulled. Ned came up with both hands on the rope and his face gray. He cleared the rail and lay on the deck. His left lower leg bled in 2 long cuts, clean and shallow, not a bite. He had hit a rough edge. Bull rapped it with quick hands. Ned did not look back over the side. He stared at the mast and swallowed hard. I felt sick relief as if I'd been holding my breath since he fell. The crew spoke in short bursts now. Willis said the wheel felt wrong at center. Sutter said he would go over the back at first light to look if the sea allowed it. The captain agreed and told us to take down the lamp at the back rail and set 2 smaller ones forward to change the light on the wake. He told Owen to keep the iron poles near but to hold until he gave word. He told me to mark the hour and note wind, sea, and any noise. I wrote as fast as I could form letters. Near midnight, the water brightened in a wide ring as if many small creatures flashed at once. The ring moved at a steady speed and crossed our path. The ship's front met it and passed through. As we crossed, the knock came again, but lighter, like a test. Then a head broke the surface just beyond the right side. It was wide and blunt with the mouth closed. The upper jaw showed a line of small pits. The eye was set far to the side and looked forward only a little. It watched our ship for a long breath, then sank without a splash. The light in the water ran along its back for a moment and then went out. No one spoke. Owen lifted his iron pole and set it down again. "Not that way," he said in a low voice. "We do not strike a maker of waves with a hand stick." Parson Whitlow began a prayer under his breath. He cut it short when the captain looked at him and gave a small shake of the head. The men needed their ears clear. The captain ordered quiet and nothing else. He stood by the wheel with Willis and kept his hand on the bar. His other hand went once to his back and stopped there for a moment. I saw it and then looked away. It was a private pane. The ship held a slow southwestern path, held almost entirely by the arrangement of the sails now. The wheel gave little help. Before dawn, Sutter set up a rope and went under the back with a tool bag on his chest. We held the rope tight. He stayed down long enough for my throat to tighten, then came up and spit water. "Lower hinge twisted," he said. Rudder face scratched. "No break." He drew breath. "It is rubbing a groove." It knows that place. He did not say how he knew that, but the certainty carried more fear than a guess. The captain ordered a drag put out at the back of the rudder to pull water past it and keep it braced. We paid out 2 small barrels with a net between them and a long rope. The back steadied a little. We tried a new test at first light. Owen made a bundle of spare rope and wrapped it around a pole end to make a bumper. He fixed 2 iron hooks to it facing backward. He lowered it off the right back corner on a chain so it hung 1 arm length under the surface. If the thing rammed there, it would take iron in its skin. He stood with the chain in hand and watched the water. The sea stayed level. The glow faded as the sun lifted behind cloud. For a while I thought we had seen the worst. Then the water to the left swelled in a long rise. The ship tilted toward it. A back broke the surface. It was not a roll like a whale's. It rose straight up for a distance and fell, showing a width that ran longer than our boat. The skin looked marked with scars and patches. I saw 2 round pits set far apart. They were not eyes. They were old wounds that had healed deep. The tail came last, a heavy wedge that moved once and set the sea running toward us. When the back fell, the bumper chain jerked. Owen held his feet and held. The chain groaned and then went slack. He pulled in fast. 2 hooks were gone. The wood had split. He set the broken piece on deck and stared at it without a word. Hargreaves said in a clear voice, "We must change water." He pointed again to the map farther south and west. "If we hold this direction, we may cross a line to cooler sea." The captain looked at the dull sails, and then at the wake. "We will try," he said. He ordered what sail we could use and small adjustments to angle. We gained a little more speed. The men moved with care as if each footstep could shake the thing loose or call it back. The next strike did not aim for wood. It came from under the front and lifted us. The front end cleared the water for a moment. The ship slammed down and the cracks creaked. A barrel in the storage area shifted and thumped. Sutter went below to block it and came back up with sweat on his face despite the mild air. "If it breaks the front post," he said to me low enough that only I heard, "we will pump until our arms fail and then we will not pump." I nodded because any words would have shown more fear than I wanted to show. By late morning, Ned could stand on his leg. He asked to take his watch only to feel useful. The captain let him hold a rope by the front mast and told him to speak at once if he felt the deck jump. Ned gave 1 short nod and did as told. He did not look over the side. Toward noon, we saw fish again for the first time in days. A small group of mackerel or something like them flashed ahead of the front. They did not scatter and dart as usual. They moved in a tight group and stayed near the surface as if pushed from below. The group cut across our path and disappeared to the right. Moments later, the water ahead darkened. The ship ran into a slick that spread farther than I could see to either side. It smelled of oil and old meat. Fat blobs stuck to the front and slid back along the boards. The deck grew slippery. Ned got sand again and worked it underfoot. He did not complain or ask questions. He worked as if each sweep might please something he could not name. In the middle of that slick, a shape rose and turned on its side. The head showed again, wider now in the clear light of day. The mouth opened a hand's width. Rows of teeth showed inside, not needles, but wide and triangle-shaped, set in rows. The mouth closed and the head sank. I had seen sharks caught off Madeira. This mouth was bigger than any of those by a count I could not make. My stomach turned, not at the gore, at the size. Hargreaves drew breath and let it out slow. "We measure our world wrongly," he said, almost to himself. Then he shut his mouth as if he had given more away than he wished. The captain made a hard choice. Then he ordered gunpowder brought up. We carried 2 small swivel guns and a handful of balls because the company expected no fight at sea. He told Willis and Owen to load them anyway. "If it rises near enough," he said, "we will give it metal." Owen checked the holes in primer. He set 1 gun on the front and 1 on the back. The crew moved with focus now. Fear had become a list of tasks. I kept the journal and then put down, the pen for a moment and leaned my hands on the lid of the box. I thought of harbors and white cliffs and the sound of carts on stone. I allowed that thought and then set it aside. We were not near any of those things. We were here with a ship of oak, 2 small guns, hooks, ropes, and a thing that had taken iron and did not care. The only way was forward into whatever the sea and the day would bring. I closed the box and stood up. The captain raised his hand for quiet. He looked from face to face. He did not give a speech. He pointed to the front and then to the back. "Watch," he said, "and do not waste a shot." Before we fired any shot, the sea around us went dead calm again. There was no wave, no wind, no cross movement. It looked like the surface froze, but it was still water. The captain stepped toward the front gun and leaned a hand against the side wall. He watched the slick around us, and his eyes narrowed, not in panic, but in thinking. Owen stayed at the back gun and kept both hands on the handles. He was breathing slow through his nose in a controlled way that men use when they have already accepted pain in advance. Parson Whitlow moved toward Ned and stood next to him. They did not speak. Ned held a rope in his hands, but the rope wasn't tied to anything at the moment. He just needed something solid to hold. His hands shook once, then steadied. The boy was frightened, but he had not lost himself. Bull kneeled and checked the wrapping of his bandage again, even though it didn't need checking. His hands needed work, or they would start shaking. Hargreaves took another position reading from the sun, even though it was pointless in the cloud cover. Every man was holding on to some action because standing still and waiting for that thing to choose its moment felt worse than anything it could do. The sound that came next was not a knock. It was a slow grinding under the bottom, trailing from front to back. The beams shook through our boots. It felt like a slow drag of heavy bone on oak. Sutter gripped the rail and closed his eyes. "It is measuring," he said. He said it low. I do not think he meant to speak it out loud. I do not know how he figured that out, but the moment he said it, every man knew he was right. The grinding stopped at the back. Owen tightened his jaw and got the gun ready. The head didn't rise first. The tail came up from the water in a steep arc, only part of it visible, but enough to see the scale in daylight. The surface broke around it, and I saw the scars again, old deep-heeled lines. It swung downward out of sight. The back rose next higher than before, directly off the back where Owen's gun was already pointed. It stayed there long enough for every man on board to see that the scars were not single injuries. They were layered from years. Something had fought this creature many times and failed to kill it. The captain whispered almost without meaning to, "God help us." Owen waited until the massive shape began to turn. Then he fired. The shot struck slightly back of the center line of that wide head. A plume of water and smoke shot up. The echo rolled long and flat across the still sea. The back disappeared instantly. The back of the ship dipped down. The rudder jerked so violently that the rope snapped and lashed across the deck like a whip. Willis barely dodged it and fell sideways against the back rail. He hit his ribs hard and gasped, but stayed awake. The creature struck under the ship. It hit us off-center to the right midship. Every man grabbed whatever he could. The hit nearly rolled us so far that the lower rail dipped underwater. Water washed across the deck. The front swung off course hard. Barrels broke loose. Bull was thrown onto his hands and knees and slid 3 feet before stopping himself against a post. The sound of that hit went through the ribs and skull more than the ears. It was a pressure hit. My chest felt hit from inside. When the ship righted, the sea stayed still again. No current, no wind, only the faint ring of glowing specks moving where the ship rocked slightly in place. The ship barely moved forward. Owen kept staring at the wake where the thing had disappeared. His hand still held the gun handles, though he had already fired. His knuckles showed white. He did not let go until the captain told him to stand down and reload. While Owen and Willis reset the gun, Sutter and Hargreaves crawled to the right rail to judge the hole beneath. Sutter used a measuring pole lowered against the outer boards. He tapped and listened. "The third board below the middle line rings dull," he said. Not through, but weakened. The captain nodded once. We must not take another strike like that. His voice stayed flat, but there was no distance in his eyes anymore. He felt the edge now, like the rest of us. We held our course with what forward motion we still had. The sea continued to smell of metal and old meat. The air above the deck felt warmer than before, but not by much. There was no wind. It was as though the ocean around us had become its own sealed room. Ned asked the captain quietly, "What is it after?" The captain answered honestly, "I think it is curious, and now it is angry." Ned swallowed and continued gripping the rope. Near midday, a fin rose ahead of us. Not the creature's fin, a smaller one, black and thin. Then another. Sharks, 4 or 5. They moved in a jerky way, then suddenly ran as if pushed from beneath. The water bulged upward, but nothing showed. The sharks ran the way a horse runs from a fire. They did not return. The creature came to the surface dead ahead. The mouth opened wide this time. It was silent. The rows of teeth were clean and unbroken. It did not move toward us suddenly. It floated in the water with only its head above the surface. The size of that mouth compared to our front was something no man on earth would have believed, if he had not stood where we stood. If it lunged forward even half its own length, it could have taken the front off and crushed half the men before we could react. Hargreaves said to the captain in a low voice, "We cannot outrun it. There is no wind." The captain nodded but did not take his eyes off the creature. Then the thing closed its mouth and sank slowly straight downward. It sank without a ripple. It sank as though it decided to think. For the first time all trip, the crew spoke openly without looking for permission. "Why would it stop?" Willis asked. Owen said, "It is thinking about how to take the ship whole." The parson said nothing. His hands held the tiny Bible bag like a tool in a vise. He did not open it, but he did not put it away either. The captain looked at each man. "We do not split or panic. We prepare. We set traps. We make this ship taste of iron. Sutter, get every spare hook and nail. Ball bandages ready. Tourniquets ready. Hargreaves, chart a direct southwest path toward colder water. If we find cooler sea, perhaps it leaves us." He turned to Owen last. "If it rises again within iron reach, strike. Do not hesitate. We have no second chances." Owen nodded once. The nod was slow and full. I went below to check the lowest part of the ship. The bottom crack we worried about was holding, but there was a new bending crack along a frame joint 3 beams forward. It wasn't leaking yet. It would if the ship was struck there again. I closed the hatch and stood still for a moment in the dim storage area. I felt the coldness in my gut that comes when a man knows numbers are turning against him. That thing was not finished. It was only beginning to look at us. When I came back up on deck, the sea still lay smooth as polished stone. The captain ordered one last attempt to bait it into a wound before nightfall, but this time the bait would hold shaped metal that would not simply break away. We prepared the trap in complete silence. Before we lowered the trap, the captain made sure every man understood the plan. We would hang 2 linked anchors from the right back corner, set 3 arm lengths down, tied to chain and not rope. Between the anchors we fixed a cage of locked-together iron scrap, nails, spikes, hooks, and the broken gun barrel rings we had split flat. Inside that cage we fixed a barrel of salt beef. If the creature tore into it, there was no way for it to bite without taking iron through its mouth or jaw. And if it got tangled, the anchors would drag against the ship and slow it enough for Owen to strike at the head with an iron pole, or for the back gun to put a shot directly into the skull at close range. Not a single man argued. We all wanted one clean hit that would hurt it. We needed to show it that we were not only prey. We moved as one group and lowered the trap slowly. The chain rattled straight down. When the slack eased and the anchors took the weight, the barrel sat hanging under the water. The captain did not want it drifting at full depth. He wanted it low enough that the creature had to show itself clearly to strike. As soon as the final length of chain was tied, we waited. The air felt heavier. The water stayed flat. Even the bird stayed gone. Ned sat on the deck with his back against the mainmast. His right hand held his rope again, but his left rested lightly on his bandaged lower leg. He was pale but not shut down. His eyes stayed sharp. There was a quiet acceptance in him that had not been there days earlier. The boy who chased rats with rope was gone. Something older now sat in his place. Bull stayed kneeling next to his bag. His face looked tired, but he was prepared for whatever came next. Parson Whitlow leaned near the rail, watching the smooth water, but he never let go of his Bible bag. Hargreaves kept the map open against the mast support. He had found a path that, if wind returned, would take us across a line of current where water should be cooler. His finger tapped that line once every few minutes, as if reminding himself that sailing still mattered in a place where reason barely worked. The captain stood near the trap chain with his hand on the tying pin. He stared at the place where the barrel hung below, as if he could see through the water. "When this begins," the captain said to all of us quietly, "there will be no orders except one. Strike and reload." Nothing else. We all nodded. No one spoke again. The first sign came from deep below the front. A faint hum that shook the ship. Not living noise, pressure noise. The hum rose slow and then stopped. The smell changed in the air again, stronger and sharper. Then a push of water rose beneath us. The surface bulged and lifted the ship. Not like a swell, not spread wide. It lifted from directly beneath us. The creature was testing upward lift. The bottom was forced upward several inches and then dropped again. The ship slapped the water flat. The captain gave no reaction. He only waited for the real strike. The second sign came from the chain. The chain links rattled once lightly. Not enough to pull the anchors, just enough to tell us that something brushed it. Ned whispered without realizing he spoke out loud. "It knows every inch of the ship now." The chain rattled again, harder. The ship trembled. The chain groaned and stretched tight like a bowstring. We looked over the right back corner. 2 arm lengths down, the water brightened as the glowing water was moved by the mass below. It was moving directly at the trap. Owen raised his iron pole. Willis made the back gun ready. The captain held the pin hard enough that his knuckles turned white. A massive dark shape rose fast and rammed the anchors and the barrel in one sudden lunge. The chain snapped tight so violently that the wood of the post cracked. The ship jerked sideways. The barrel broke instantly in a violent churn of water and flashing light. We could see metal shine in the sea below as the scrap cage twisted. The creature shook the entire trap and then rushed under the ship. The chain ripped 3 feet downward, then snapped back again so hard the deck post creaked. A deep roar of pressure sounded below, not hearable through air but through bone. Every man felt it. The creature was trying to tear the anchors free. If it worked, it would drag the chain and bend the ship into a break.
"Hold the chain,"
the captain yelled. 4 men threw weight on the gear. The chain tore skin off Sutter's palms, but he kept his grip. The anchors held. The scrap cage held. Something was caught. The creature thrashed once, twice. The ship leaned over so sharply that water washed over half the right deck. Ned skidded and almost lost his grip, but the parson grabbed his shoulder and anchored him to the mast. Owen was already moving before the next shake. He kneeled at the rail and leaned out, iron pole forward, waiting for the exact moment the head came close enough. A third violent heave came from beneath. The chain loosened, then jerked again. The beast tried to roll. The anchor scraped under us. The metal grinding was unbearable. Sutter screamed through clenched teeth as the chain tore at his hands again. Then the head rose. It burst up half out of the water, a full 2 arms lengths off the right rail. Jaws half open, mouth massive enough to take half the ship. Owen did not wait. He lunged downward with the iron pole and drove it deep just behind the right eye. The pole went into the socket. The handle shook in his grip. Blood burst out in a thick sheet. The creature shook its head once and the iron pole shaft bent sideways but did not tear free. The beast roared underwater. The whole sea seemed to shake with the sound. The creature crashed down and disappeared. The chain ripped downward again and nearly pulled all 4 men off their feet. But then something changed. The tension loosened. The chain went slack. The anchors hung as dead weight again. It let go. The sea went still again. Every man stood frozen, waiting for a revenge strike. None came. For a long, full minute, there was no sound at all besides shallow breath from tired men. Then a large, spreading cloud of dark blood appeared far off the right front. The glow in the water flickered inside that cloud, then thinned, then faded. Hargreaves whispered, "We wounded it. It retreats." Owen remained kneeling at the rail, staring down where his iron pole had disappeared with the beast. His hands shook now, not with fear, with delayed force and aftermath. We waited 5 more minutes without movement or sound. When nothing returned, the captain finally breathed out and stepped back. "We fix what we can," he said. "We hold course. If the wind returns, we run for colder water. If it comes back, we finish what we started." He turned to Ned. "Boy, get sand. Clean blood off this deck." Ned nodded and got to work immediately. No hesitation. His face was serious but steady. I took the journal and wrote the hour and the details. Owen stayed kneeling without moving for a long time. The parson put a hand on his shoulder briefly. Owen did not look up. He was not in shock, not exactly. He was thinking about the fact that he had put iron into something that every earlier age would have called impossible. Night came slowly. Still no wind. The sea remained strangely smooth, but that feeling of pressure under the ship was gone. We waited for night and whatever it might bring next. When night fell, the sky remained covered but with thinner cloud. We could see faint starlight bleed through in patches, but no moon. The water lost all glow. The slick around us broke up slowly. The blood cloud in the distance had drifted further off. The sea returned to being only heavy and flat, no wind. The ship barely moved forward under the weight of its own force and the slight swell that still traveled below the surface. The captain did not dismiss watches. He made everyone rotate in pairs. No one would be left alone at any post. He told me to keep riding, but to stay at the main mast with the others. Bull set lamps low and covered on the deck so we would keep night vision out to the water. Owen sat near the back gun with fresh gunpowder and shot already measured and set. He had not spoken since the strike. His face was blank but focused. The parson prayed silently now without moving his lips. Hargreaves sat next to him and stared into the dark water, not with fear but with a tired acceptance. We waited in half silence for hours. The ship settled into a new rhythm, not of normal sailing but of careful waiting. Every creak from the ship made men flinch slightly, then calm again when nothing followed. Sutter wrapped his palms and fingers carefully in strips of canvas, but the raw skin still showed. Bull cleaned the wounds on his hands with vinegar, even though Sutter cursed and tried to pull back. "If you let it get infected, you die for nothing," Bull said. Sutter nodded and kept still through the burn. Around what felt like midnight, a slight wind stirred over the deck. It was not enough to fill sails, but enough to break the heat and still pressure in the air. Every man noticed it. At the same moment we looked up, each expecting maybe a shift that would let us move again. "Get ropes ready for when the wind lifts enough," the captain said quietly. He didn't want to break the tension. He spoke as if the creature could hear us. Ned stood and moved to help Owen at the back. His leg held. He worked slower but with steady control. That steadiness mattered more than speed. Ned had changed in the last day more than any man that young should. He listened more. He watched everyone. His fear had settled into something like sharpened discipline. There was no trace of shock or denial. A faint ripple broke the surface far out to the left. Not big, just a movement. We all saw it, we waited. A second small ripple drifted near the first. Then nothing followed. Willis looked at me and whispered, "Could be whales again." I did not answer. None of us wanted to assume anything harmless. Nothing came closer for another hour. Men began to breathe a little easier, but the captain did not lower guard. "It will return if it intends to finish us," he said. "We do not relax until wind sets us moving." Near the end of second watch, I saw a faint current movement toward the right. The slick had fully cleared now and the water looked darker. The temperature at the surface felt slightly cooler when I dipped a bucket and tested by hand. I told the captain. Hargreaves confirmed it. The current might be shifting. If we could catch any wind at all, we might drift toward colder water sooner than expected. The captain gave a single nod. "Stay ready," he said to all of us. "This change is either our escape beginning or the trap getting tighter." The creature returned right after that. The return came without sound or warning. Its strike landed at the back post again, but weaker and incomplete. It was more of a push than a full ramming, as if testing if we still held ourselves ready, as if it wanted to see if we believed it had gone fully away. Owen had been waiting exactly for such a test. The instant that push hit, he swung the back gun toward the disturbance and fired without waiting for a full surface break. The shot struck just under the surface. There was a burst of water that shot far higher than the cannon should have created on its own. We all heard something under the water. Then a low grinding movement followed by deeper movement. The crew held themselves ready again in silence. The creature did not strike back immediately. It circled us instead. We felt the pressure rise again under the ship as it passed below, but it remained deeper this time. It was weaker. The wound had taken something from it. We could tell by the tone of its pressure sound. It seemed slower now. After 5 long passes beneath, the creature finally showed itself again, but not by rising. It came to the surface far from the ship this time, maybe 500 arm lengths to the west. We saw its back not gliding toward us, but moving at a steady leaving angle. It was leaving. The scar we had made behind the eye was visible from distance. It was an open, fresh gash across pale cartilage and hard skin. It had no interest now in rushing us again. It was saving strength. It sank without a final gesture. Owen stared at the spot where it disappeared. He lowered his ironless hands and breathed out once. The parson closed both hands around his Bible and bowed his head in silent thanks. The captain kept standing still and watching the silent dark water long after it left. He didn't let go of that tying pin until he was certain no sudden reversal would come. When he finally stepped away, we all understood the immediate danger had ended. At dawn the next morning, wind returned, not hard but steady and cold. The sea gained small waves again. The smell eased. The surface ripple finally returned. The water temperature continued dropping as we came closer to the line Hargreaves had marked. The crew worked sails without command. They all knew speed now mattered more than rest. By midday, the Mercy was moving at 4 full knots southwest. It felt like we were being allowed to leave. That night, the creature did not return. The next day, the smell was gone fully. The dolphins returned and ran near our front again. A small seagull circled us at noon. The sea looked like any other sea. Clean current, fresh wind, normal waves. We had crossed into another area of water entirely. We made land weeks later in Plymouth. The captain wrote a formal report. Officials read it and dismissed half of it. They thought we made a whale bigger than it was. They thought we panicked in calm seas. They said sharks drift injured sometimes and leave odd marks. They believed only the parts that could be made smaller. But every man on board that trip signed the same technical entries in the ship journal. We measured what we saw. We measured the toothpiece. We measured the bite groove on the barrel wood. We described the mouth exactly. We wrote only fact. Men in taverns laughed at pieces of the story when we told it quietly. But each man on board Mercy knew there was no making it bigger. It happened exactly as written in the journal. Some years later, another long toothpiece from another place turned up in someone's private display case, and scholars began to talk again about ancient giant sharks that lived once and died with old seas. They said such things lived long before any man walked on Earth. That was the beginning of men using a different word. Megalodon. We did not know that word at sea then, but we knew what hunted us. I never saw anything like it again in my lifetime. Ned grew into a man and worked on several ships after this before moving inland to raise a family. Owen stayed at sea and never hunted large sea life again. He said that once a man has struck iron into something that should not exist, he never again tries to prove himself against beasts. Hargreaves continued making maps and never spoke publicly about the event again, but in private he told me he never doubted the journal a single day. The captain lived many more years and worked his back pain into habit until it never held him from sea duty again. On his last day alive, I visited him. I asked him if he ever thought we were one moment away from being swallowed whole that night. He said not one moment, many. And then he said that he believed the only reason we survived was because we fought back. He told me to make sure the journal was never changed just to be believed. I never changed a word.